welcome everybody to week 9, day 1. A friend of mine posted this on Facebook, and I think it's a pretty good example of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Basically, people get some memes and post their opinions, and yeah, everybody on Facebook stopped being infectious disease experts and became international relations experts. Yeah. So, morning. What do we got? We got 10 people, 12 people on the stream right now. Oh. Any questions about what we've done so far in this class? We're kind of more than halfway through the semester, maybe. We've done a little bit of computer science, a little bit of programming, a little bit of logic, a little bit of fallacies, argumentation, cognitive biases. Any big high-level questions? Nope. All right. Then let's do this. A few more cognitive biases, then we'll move on to another social issue in computer science. Last week we talked about Facebook a little bit and social media, if it's good or not for the world. Okay, motivated reasoning. So motivated reasoning is when you want something to be true, and so you accept evidence for it a lot more easily than the opposite. And contrawise too. Like if you don't want something to be true, then you tend to reject arguments for it. Also, we tend to seek out arguments. Like, if you're a Christian and like one of your atheist friends challenges your beliefs, you don't really have an answer for them, then it's pretty common for people to Google, like, what are some good arguments for God? You know what I mean? And contrariwise, if you're an atheist, like, what are some good arguments against God? And to a certain extent, like, it's okay, right? Like, if you've never looked up an issue before, look it up. You know what I mean? But the bias comes in when we were like, well, that argument says what I believe, so I'm going to believe it. Yeah, that's amazingly powerful, amazingly common, and very, very dangerous, right? We should be trying to base our beliefs on what is true, right? What has more evidence for, what has more evidence against, balancing it. Everything in critical thinking is ultimately boils down to pros and cons. How much evidence is for, how much evidence is against, and proportioning belief to the evidence, not the other way around. Motivated reasoning is the other way around. I want to believe that Bill Cosby is not a rapist, therefore Bill Cosby is not a rapist. Bill Cosby, if you don't know who he is, was one of the biggest comedians in the 80s, and had a TV show called The Cosby Show. The Cosby Show was the #1 show in America. And, when I was a kid, I loved watching The Cosby Show. Very positive, very uplifting TV show. And so later on, when all these allegations started coming out against Bill Cosby, like, I just didn't want to believe them because motivated reasoning, Just because I teach computer science and critical thinking doesn't mean I'm a robot, you know what I mean? Like, all humans are prey to these cognitive biases, because, I did not want one of my childhood heroes to be a bad guy, So, people try to scam with motivational reasoning. How so? Give me an example of that. I might not believe you, but give me an example of that. All right. So basically, humans are emotional creatures, right? And we want to believe things that match our emotions. And part of being a critical thinker and a rational person is being able to think slowly and deliberately about things, and being rational, being logical, not just being swayed by emotion. Okay, so when we believe things that when we allow ourselves to be convinced by things that tell us that we're right, that's called confirmation bias. Right? So, I buy a new Jeep or something, And then, I read something about Jeeps having some sort of mechanical problem, and I read an article where it's like, no, you really should have bought a Jeep. Now is the right time to do it. I'm like, okay, good, thank you. I believe you. Confirmation bias. We seek out things that agree with us. Okay? So, confirmation bias and motivated reasoning are very closely related. They're not going to both show up on a multiple choice question. Okay. So, just be aware of your own biases. If you're a Christian, be aware you're going to be predisposed to believing in arguments for Christianity. If you're an atheist, you're predisposed to arguments for atheism. If you're a Jew, you're predisposed to arguments for Judaism. If you're Buddhist, you're predisposed to arguments towards Buddhism being right. Hindu, etc., etc., etc. So just be aware of it, right? If you're going to be trying to fairly evaluate an argument, then just be aware of your own biases. Hey, I'm probably going to be more easily swayed by something that tries to tell me that I'm right. Nobody likes to be wrong. You know what I mean? It's a painful feeling. Oh man, I went my whole life believing that, and I was wrong. Oh man, I'm an idiot. Nobody wants to be an idiot, And so we do these ego protecting maneuvers to avoid being an idiot, But in reality, we're wrong about things all the time. You know what I mean? That's not how you spell Kroger's supermarket, right? I think there's no E in it or something like that. Yeah. So, if you remember that from last lecture, I was trying to be funny, but it's with no E. Oh, so happens, right? I learned this from psychology. People tend to be more persuaded by evidence that appeals to their beliefs and ignore evidence that doesn't correspond to their beliefs. Yeah. And I believe you because you agree with me. What you're saying, Raymar, is that I'm right, and therefore I believe you. Because if I'm right, that makes me a smart person. So I am going to believe you, even though I have no evidence that what you're saying is true, other than your ipsy dixit, your say so. I'm going to believe you because it makes me feel good about myself. There we go. Okay. All right. So, in-group bias. So, motivated reasoning is very powerful, very prevalent, very common. You can't get away from it. Some things like Dunning-Kruger, just a little bit of intellectual humility, you can kind of get away from it a little bit. Motivated reasoning is inescapable. It's inescapable. It's just everywhere. And turn on any news channel, and you will see the news representing the beliefs of the people making it. It's possible to do news in such a way that you minimize your bias. But I think news organizations these days have more or less sacrificed neutrality on the altar of ratings. Okay. So in-group bias is another extremely powerful bias that is everywhere. Okay. And so, in general, in psychology, what you find is that if somebody is part of your group, you treat them better. Okay. And this probably ties into the principle of reciprocity, right? If you're in a group of friends and one of your friends needs help, let's say they're going to the hospital and they're getting surgery and they need a ride back after surgery. Yeah, I think most people here, right? Would you help out your friend? Hey, you're not working or anything, off class. How many people here, if their friend needed a ride back from surgery because you can't drive after surgery after you've been anesthetized? I think most people here would yeah, sure, of course, I'd help you out. Yeah. It's not like even your best friend, just somebody in your group of friends. You know what I mean? And assuming you have friends, right? Yeah. Most people do that, and it doesn't benefit you at all. But at a certain level, they would do the same for you. Like when you're in a group of friends, they'll help you out, you'll help them out. It's don't call me. It's part of being friends, and so we're sort of naturally predisposed to act better towards people in our groups. It's just human nature. And this is true even if the groups are completely arbitrary. For example, they'll do studies where they'll go into a room and they'll be like, all right, you guys are in a group, you guys are in a group. Like, just completely arbitrary. Like, you've never met the people before in your life, but just from them being in your group, people will act better towards them than towards the others. Okay. And they've tested this in a variety of ways. For example, there's something called it's called like the dictator game or something like that. So basically, they hand a person $10, and then that person offers to the other participant in the game a certain number of money, a certain amount of money. Like, I'll give you $3. Now, what the hell is going on over here? Let's block that. And so, if the other person accepts the offer, they get the $3, and then the person who made the offer gets the 7. If the person turns it down, nobody gets any money. And what's really interesting about this game is that a lot of people, even though it's in your self-interest to take any amount of money over 0, right? I'll offer you $1. Okay, I'll take it. Because $1 is $1 in your pocket. It's better than you had before. But what they found in economics is that people are not purely, in psychology, it's that people are not purely motivated by self-interest. Like, if I offered you $1 and I'm going to keep 9, a lot of people would be like, no, screw you. You get 0. Right? And so what they found when they do the dictator game, if they put people into these completely arbitrary groups, is that the dictators will make better offers to people in their group. Let's split it 50-50. $5 for you, $5 to me. Never met the person before in life. You just are told that person's in your group, and they will, make a better offer to them than to people that are out of the group. Is it bad to treat somebody better than a random person? No, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just a very normal thing to do. It's not even that bad. It's just like, it's just kind of like the parasocial relationships. Like, they're not inherently bad, right? Like, if you feel like, some streamer is your friend, as long as you understand they're not actually your friend, they're not going to pick you up from the hospital if you have surgery. Like, as long as you understand that, it's not like bad. You know what I mean? It's not, inherently bad. Like, Ingroup bias is a very, very human thing, right? You act better towards your friends. And it makes sense, right? Because they'll act better towards you, and that's kind of how people take care of each other, right? We form these social networks, and we help people in our social network. So, and they help us. It all makes sense. The trouble is that in-group bias is also responsible for racism and a lot of isms. You know what I mean? So, if you, they've done psychology experiments. And again, whenever I list a psychology experiment, just be aware that a lot of psychology experiments don't replicate, which we'll talk about later. So anytime you talk about an experiment in psychology, there's, a reasonably good chance it's all nonsense. But anyway, so, so they did an experiment where, they took kids in a summer camp. This is back before we had institutional review boards, and psychologists did all sorts of horrible experiments on people. Prior to medical ethics, it was, yeah. So they did a camp called Robbers Cave, and they took the boys, going as an all boys, I think, summer camp. they divided them up into two groups, and they played together for like a week or something like that. And then they were told about the existence of another group, and those people were, the bad guys or whatever. And then when the kids were brought together to do competitions like tug of war and things like that, they acted very mean towards each other, and they acted quite, unpleasantly, like, basically demonstrating the same sort of animosity that you might see in, like, oh, I don't know, the Middle East or the Balkans, or, in Italy between different Italian cities, or, you know what I mean? Like that level of, And so the psychologist then engineered a series of crises where, like, the camp's water went out, the car broke down, so nobody could get food in or out, and the boys had to work together to solve the crises. Like, the different teams had to work together to get the water going again, or to get the car fixed and things like that. And what they found was that by doing so, by having people work together, that they started acting and became friends and things like that. So it's a classic study on Ingroup Bias that you're probably not allowed to rerun today. And then there was the, what's it called? I want to say Zamboni, but those are the ice, okay, maybe it was Zamboni. Yeah. No. Maybe it was a different guy. What was it? It was the Stanford physics guy. What was the name of the guy? Zimbardo, not Zamboni. Oh. Big difference there. Okay. And so the Stanford prison experiment, they basically divided. Again, this is probably prior to medical ethics and IRBs and things like that. So basically, they divided people into prisoners and guards, and the guards acted very meanly towards the students and things like that, or towards the prisoners, the fake prisoners. They're all just students, right? And of course, that's an experiment that has failed to replicate. So take it with a grain of salt. Like, Raymar, did they tell you about that? You said you've heard about the Stanford prison experiment. Did they tell you that it failed to replicate? Ethical concerns, yeah. Some of the guards' behavior allegedly led to dangerous and psychologically damaging situations. Yeah, no kidding. So, replication. Cast further doubt on the generality of his conclusions. Yeah. So, yeah. Always be on the lookout for if a science experiment can replicate, right? Because it's possible to have bias or cherry pick or have a lot of other reasons. Okay. All right. So anyway, the guy running it was make it hard to distinguish between the researcher and the warden. Yeah. So the researcher himself was quite possibly provoking these situations, right? Trying to make a point about how prisoners are treated and things like that. Okay. So, so a lot of the problems in America today are the results of in-group bias. So, so Sela, like you said, is it bad to treat people in your group better than other people? No. But look at how Democrats and Republicans treat each other. Or look at how Democrats and Republicans treat libertarians. Or look at how libertarians treat socialists. Or look at how socialists treat everybody that's not a socialist. Right? Like, American society didn't used to be this bad. Okay? American society has become quite polarized over the past 30 years or so. Some of the people I worked with met Jim Costa and Devin Nunes, who are the representatives from from Fresno, and or were Nunez is retiring and stuff. This one I want to show. Jim Costa said, he's a Democrat from South Fresno. Nunez is more north. Jim Costa said that, even though it's politics, we're in other teams, we would hang out, we'd play basketball together, stuff like that. In recent years, no, like, it's, you're opposing camps. Right? So if you look at the median of Republicans and Democrats, you can see that they are moving away from each other, right? And that's a problem. Or maybe it's a problem. I don't know. People that are really political are a lot more polarized than people who are like not really into politics. But even still, the polarization is increasing, right? So, it's fine. Like, your political beliefs are your political beliefs. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to, if you want an explanation for a lot of American society, not just politics, immigration, right? Attitudes towards immigrants, predicated very much on if your family is a family of immigrants or if it's not, makes a big difference. Not the only thing, but it makes a big difference. Racism, sexism, religious discrimination, in a variety of different directions, right? A lot of it is based on just in-group bias. And so, that's sort of the underlying explanation. It doesn't solve anything. It's kind of the underlying explanation, in my opinion. To mitigate it, though, they've done studies on it, like the Robbers Cave study. Have people work together on a solution, have contact with others. And that's a big problem. Because, like, if you poll people on, like, a conclusion, don't have friends, you don't have any biases. Yeah, but it's not even like your friends, right? It's your personal identity. Like, if you have inside of your soul written down, I am a Democrat, or I am a Republican, or I am a Bulldogs fan, or I am a whatever label that you give yourself in your identity determines your in-group and your out-group. Okay? Like, think about Raiders fans and how they act towards people that aren't Raiders fans, right? So one solution is this: refusing categorization. Just like I don't accept any labels, right? What are you? Are you a Democrat or Republican? Neither. What are you? This or that? Neither. If you now, you might still vote a certain way, but if you reject labels, it actually helps prevent in-group bias, because your ego is not tied up in one team winning, and the other team losing. Because when it makes you feel good, oh yay, my side won the election, then that predisposes you towards your side, right? It's like when you watch the Super Bowl and you don't care who wins, right? It's a different experience. You know what I mean? Has anyone here like watched a Super Bowl where you just like literally don't care which team wins? You're just kind of watching it for the commercials. Isn't that a different experience from like when you're like, oh, I want the Falcons to win or whatever? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's different. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it feels different. Like, oh man, it's getting close and our team's down by 3 points. If you don't care who wins, it's like, oh, it's an interesting game. Look at this. It's a nail biter right to the end, So, that's in-group bias. Like, that's just an easy example of like how that works. And how refusing categorization works. Like, I don't care about it, maybe basketball. Yeah. So a friend of mine in college, she worked on a project where they were trying to bring peace to the Middle East by basically getting Israeli kids and Palestinian kids to travel together and basically interact, right? And like just be like, look, there are people, your person, their people, talk, you know? And they would go places and do activities together, things like that, basically based on this research, right? And so she was like essentially like a camp counselor for it. Yeah, there's still strife in the Middle East, but I don't know how much 20 kids at a time makes a difference, but that was at least the premise of what they were working on. Okay. And then finally, working your way through primary sources. So, like we talked last time about thinking fast and thinking slow. Thinking fast is like a quick on-the-spot judgment, but you can't make a quick on-the-spot judgment without your biases, because that's what biases are for. They predispose you to acting a certain way. Hey, do you want to go out on a date? No. Okay, thank you. Like, what I mean? Like, I don't like you, like, go away. Like, that's just, when you make a snap judgment, all of your pre-existing biases are what you're basing your judgment on. You're not taking the time to think through it and go through it slowly. Whereas if you want to allow yourself to be persuaded otherwise, which a lot of times we don't, motivated reasoning, take your time, go through the sources. What actually happened in the Crusades? That's a controversial topic. You know what I mean? And it is very hard to find a unbiased opinion on the Crusades, right? And so read the primary sources, right? What actually happened at the siege of Jerusalem? Why did the Crusades begin? What provoked it? Was it the capture of Jerusalem? Jerusalem had been captured for centuries at that point, from the Christian perspective. Why? What changed? Right? You have to read the primary sources, because anytime you go to secondary sources in history, the people who are using those primary sources, unless they're very careful, and it is possible to try and eliminate your biases as much as possible, they're going to be putting their own spin on it, right? And historians are very politicized these days, right? Like, politics really entered into history in the 1960s. There was what was called the new historians, I think, in the 1960s, whose goal was to infuse politics into history, which I find to be sort of immoral and unethical. But they're like, you can't get away from bias, so we're just going to embrace our bias and put it into history books. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that movement. I think that it's your job as a historian to try to present the evidence as is. Like, I did some research. Here's the primary sources. Here's some, the most important quotes. Here's for, here's against. Or even better, you get two historians with opposing political views. What happened during the Red Scare? Is it an ethics issue to try and avoid all bias? If you are making a textbook for students, I think you should try to eliminate as much bias as you can, right? You can never eliminate all of it, right? Because at a certain level, like, what sources you've read will feed into the textbook, right? And people tend to read sources that agree with them, right? And so, one solution is you get two people who have diametrically opposed political views work together and try to come up with a synthesis between the opposing sides. And if you, like I said, if you get into things like the Red Scare, there is a lot of information, a lot of facts on different sides. And if you have one person with one particular political outlook writing it, it will neglect to mention the things that the other people know about, right? So, for example, a left-wing person will present, typically speaking, will present the Red Scare as a moral panic. There's no basis to the allegations. They'll talk about the Hollywood blacklist and all these heroic Hollywood individuals going to Congress, and like, what's her, Bacall? Lauren Bacall. Yeah, so Lauren Bacall was a member of the Rat Pack with Gregory Peck, maybe. Oh, he went to San Diego State. That's cool. So you got all these famous actors and actresses going to Hollywood to protest the Hollywood blacklist and things like that. That's typically what the left wing will portray for the Red Scare. It's just this big thing. There's no actual communists, or if there were, they're insignificant, right? And then if you have a right wing historian like Claire or what was his name, Haynes, who are specialists on the subject from the right, they will tell you that the the assistant, uh, right, the assistant secretary of the Treasury, a guy by the name of Harry Dexter White, was a Russian spy, right? That the Americans were decrypting the Soviet communications to spies in America, and knew about various spies in the American government, and it's called Venona, and Harry Dexter White was a Soviet spy named jurist. Harry Dexter White, among other things, founded the International Money Fund and the World Bank, right? Like, he wasn't some insignificant person. And you will not hear about that if you read it from a left-wing source. From the right-wing source, it will tend to downplay the effects of, the Red Scare, right? Like, in the House Un-American Activities Committee and McCarthy were actually two different things, right? Like, a lot of people don't know that either. Senator McCarthy was a senator. The House Un-American Activities Commission was in the House. These are two different branches of government and had two different things. And to what extent, like, McCarthy knew about the Venona project is unclear. It's not clear if he actually had a list of names of people in the government. It's possible he had just heard that there was a list of names of people in the government. He never showed it to anybody, or the list would change and things like that. So in my opinion, like, textbooks should have somebody from the left and somebody from the right working together, and because they've read themselves different sources and have different bodies of knowledge they know about, and then they could put both into the textbook. It's something that actually bugs me when there's very pertinent data that's just left out, and then that gives the people reading it a one-sided view of a subject. So that's my rant on academia. It's one of my rants on academia. Don't get me started on the prices of textbooks. or whether college should be about teaching students or not. What do you think? You haven't said anything for the past 6 minutes. Chat. What is the purpose of college? Let's toss out a nice. For those of you that are watching the stream at home, what is the purpose of college? I have my own strong opinions on the matter, but to get smarter. Basic education. It's a K-12 basic education. Yeah. Why are you, you're all in college, Why are you in college? You want to get a piece of paper with your name on it? Get a job? Give you a piece of paper for grad school acceptance? Prepare for a career? Train people for a future job? Pursue higher education because everyone expects you to? I'm just here because my parents told me? Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. My daughter's not going to have a choice in the matter. You're going to college. Train people for a job, better opportunities, specialize your skills in a particular field. Get connections, that's a big one, right? Get connections and possible future employees. Further education to a specialty. Connections, yeah. I like how Rachel put it. I'm looking for possible future employees, not employers, right? So people I can hire. So make sure you all make friends with Rachel. She's going places. So I forgot, make friends, yeah. Like, I'm still friends with a lot of my college buddies, when I missed class a couple weeks ago, that was because one of my friends from when I was in college was dying, right? And I went there with another friend of mine from college, and making friends is important. Like, I'm not gonna deny that. I'm a literal shut-in right now in the dorms. It's kind of bad. Because of COVID, or you like, is it short shut-in because of COVID or something? Wait, oops. No, either way, the way that you phrased it was good. So good on you. So, and I've talked about this Ingroup Bias thing before here, right? So like, Democrats believe the Democrat, Republicans believe the Republican, Independents were split, and this is a terrifying graph. If you think about it, it's a terrifying graph. People looked at the exact same evidence, and when it came down to it, who do you believe? They believed the people that agreed with them. They believed the people they wanted to believe. They wanted to believe the people that were in their group. Okay. So, college, from the professor's side, is an interesting question, right? There's kind of three large college systems in California, right? There's the community college system, there's the state college system, and there's the UC system, right? And the attitude of the different systems towards students differs, right? Community colleges, the professors at a community college, the instructors at a community college, basically just teach, right? They're just there to teach. At the UC, your primary job is actually research. The goal of the university is essentially to do research. My institution, UC San Diego, brought in billions of dollars of research funding per year. And professors had to teach 3 classes. We had 3 quarters, right? You had to teach 3 classes a year. That's full time. 1 class per quarter. Summer's off. It's not very much, right? It's not very much. And on top of that, you'd have grad students and other things like that. Like, it wasn't, like, they were busy, right? But a lot of what they were busy with was doing research and writing papers and running a lab of researchers and going to conferences and reading papers and doing peer review and all that kind of stuff. The whole undergraduate education side, like all the college, undergraduates, not really a priority. And in fact, most of the professors in the department didn't want to teach like first year and second year students. Like, no. So they would hire lecturers for that. So a lecturer is somebody who's not tenured. They're not really part of the department, like they are, but like they're second class citizens, you know what I mean? And they would hire these people, these sacrificial lambs, to teach classes that have 800 people in it, right? And nowadays, like, it's better. Like, UCSD has been hiring what are called professors of the practice. A professor of the practice is a professor who is a teaching track faculty. They're there to teach rather than a research track faculty who's there to do research, which is the traditional professorship, is to do research and to lead a team of grad students and advance the fields of science. That's the goal of a professor, is to advance the field, advance human knowledge, not to teach. And so for these large classes that, have hundreds of people, it's very stressful. Like, you get credit for teaching a class if there's 6 people in it or if there's 600. So all of the professors, by and large, wanted to teach small classes, maybe an upper division class with 30 people, maybe a grad class with like 9 people, 10 people, 12 people, something like that. And so, the purpose of a research institution is to do research, and then the undergraduates are just kind of like there, and they kind of annoy the department, like the department, from the department's goal, it's like, how do we get these people out of the major, how do we filter people out, and so they would set up filter classes and try and get people out so that the professors who deal with them in upper division don't have too much homework to read. The question of college, and so the goal of students and the goals of professors don't really align, right? In those institutions, right? So, it's a problem, and when you're paying lots of money to go to college. Like ideally, you want to find a group that is, to find a college that is kind of like on your side. So yeah, no, connections are important. Training for jobs, I guess, is important. Yeah, sure. A lot of times, like you can just, if you could work in the industry to begin with, it depends. Like if you want to become a nurse, you probably have to go to nursing school. If you want to become a doctor, you want to go to doctor school, medical school. But like for a programmer, like a lot of programmers I know are just self-trained and they go to work for industry and then they learn everything they need to know in industry. So I don't know. Better opportunities, yeah. Once you're working in industry, though, like nobody really cares too much about your college degree. It's just to get kind of your first job. Am I telling you guys to drop out? No, I'm not. But it's the kind of thing that a lot of times, like people just go to college because they're on autopilot. Why do you go to college? Because you're expected to. And and if you're going to become a doctor or something, like you have to, right? Like it's not optional if you want to become a pharmacist or something, right? But it's good to think about things like slowly and deliberately. Like I was a computer science major. I wanted to write programs and do cool stuff. Out of high school, I was hired to do virtual reality arcade games. Kind of cool. And I could have done that full time. Instead, I thought about it. Like, I made a deliberate decision. Like, why am I here? What am I doing? What do I want? What's my long-term goal? And all of these things require you to actually sit down and think about it slowly and deliberately. Okay, that's what critical thinking is about. Make a list, pros, cons. Pros, I can make lots of money. Cons, I don't get my college education. Okay, what's in a college education? What inside of that is valuable for me as a computer science major? And the answer, for those of you that are computer science majors, is that computer science programs teach you things that are different from what you learn in industry. They teach you things like mathematical proofs. They teach you how to think rigorously. Like, hopefully I'm trying to convey to you right now, how to think. Like, one of the most powerful things somebody told me is that college is not there to teach you what to think, it is teach you how to think. College is there to teach you how to think. It's not about the actual content of the classes. It's about cultivating the college-educated mindset where you look at evidence and you're like, that seems fishy to me. Or you watch TV, you're like, that's a fallacy. Or, somebody says something, you're like, I don't know if that's true or not. And weighing something and being deliberative and being rational. And that's ultimately what college is about. College is ultimately about, in my opinion, this class right here. Right? College is about becoming a college-educated person, about becoming somebody who has that mindset. Okay. And, getting jobs and making friends and doing beer pong or whatever. And so for me, there are things that are taught in computer science programs that are not taught in industry. All the math, all the proof stuff, like you will not find, like maybe there's probably some place that'll do it, but you won't find that outside of college, right? And I didn't think that all that mathy kind of stuff would benefit me as a programmer, because ultimately I just want to make video games, just like, make cool stuff. Like that's really what I like doing. I like building cool stuff. And in my 4th semester class, like my students last week demonstrated all their builds, and I guess I could show it to you. Like one of them built like an automatic dog feeder, and so they have a sensor, they have a camera that points at a dog's food bowl, has a image recognition engine running on it. When the dog's food bowl is empty, it sends a signal to a servo. The servo goes like this, and dog food comes out and goes into the bowl. Then things like, all right, there's food in the bowl. Puts back up. Cool stuff. Building cool stuff. Like that's what I wanted. And I didn't really see the benefit of all the math and the reasoning and the logic and the truth tables. I'm like, all of this seems very dry. Like none of this seems very useful. And then what I found was that after I went through all that logical training, all the critical thinking training, all the truth tables and ands and ors and nots and all that kind of stuff, was that it actually helped order my thinking. Like my thinking actually became more organized and more reasonable, I guess you might say. And the programs that I started writing were a lot better because of it, right? And even if you're not a programmer, having a more orderly system of thought and being aware of your biases and being aware of fallacies and things like that, all of that will benefit you no matter what career you go into in your life. Mic drop. I'm out. See you guys on Wednesday.